South Africa's taxi industry moves billions every year. It employs thousands and connects millions of daily commuters. But in the 2010s, one township in Pretoria fell under the grip of a man who turned that transport network into something darker. Vusi Mathibela controlled Mamelodi's taxis through fear. He extorted drivers, orchestrated violence, and ultimately ordered a murder that would take nearly a decade to prosecute. His story isn't just about one criminal. It's about how an informal industry became a gateway to organized crime, and how power, financial, political, and violent can bend an entire community. This is the story of how South Africa's most notorious taxi kingpin finally met justice. Mamelodi is a large township east of Pretoria. Like many South African townships, it relies on minibus taxis for transport. The taxi sector isn't small. Nationwide, roughly 200,000 minibuses generate about R90 billion in annual revenue. These vehicles carry workers, students, and families every day. The industry began during apartheid as a gray market serving black laborers, and it remains loosely regulated. Vusi Mathibela, born around 1986, built his power base within this system. By the 2010s, he ran the Mamelodi Amalgamated Taxi Association, known as MATA. He turned that association into a formidable empire. Drivers paid him weekly fees, between R100 and R200, under threat of violence. Those who refused faced consequences. His network included armed bodyguards, some brought in from KwaZulu-Natal. He enforced his rules with precision. Witnesses later described his operation as a protection racket. Drivers paid, or they lost their vehicles, their routes, or worse. The press called him Mamelodi's #1 Tsotsi. Some compared him to Al Capone. His reputation spread beyond the taxi ranks. Residents spoke about him in whispers. Business owners feared him. His grip on Mamelodi was absolute. Mathibela didn't operate in isolation. His rise involved strategic alliances. He cultivated connections with powerful figures. Just days before the murder that would define his legacy, Mathibela attended a meeting at Emperor's Palace Casino in Kempton Park. Present at that meeting were businessman Wandile Boswana and then Police Minister Fikile Mbalula. The timing was significant. The meeting occurred in May 2015. Boswana would be dead by October. Mbalula later denied any improper relationship with Mathibela. He threatened legal action when accused of protecting the taxi boss. But the image persisted, a criminal moving in circles with ministers and businessmen. Provincial politicians also surfaced in the narrative. Supra Mahumapelo, who served as Premier of Northwest at the time, was later accused by some of ordering Boswana's killing. Mahumapelo denied the claim. No politician has been charged in connection with the murder. These connections created a shield. When charges emerged, extortion, assault, organized crime, prosecution often stalled. Witnesses refused to cooperate. Police faced a code of silence. Inside Mamelodi, people understood the risk of speaking out. Mathibela's network wasn't just about money. It was about survival in a system where formal law enforcement struggled to reach. On October 2, 2015, Northwest businessman Wandile Boswana drove through Pretoria with his associate Mfo Baloyi. They were returning from Sandton City in Johannesburg. CCTV captured them at Mandela Square earlier that day. As they approached the Garsfontein off-ramp, gunmen ambushed their BMW. Boswana was shot 9 times. Baloyi, who was driving, was also wounded but survived. She drove Boswana to a hospital. He died from his injuries. Boswana was wealthy. He had accumulated money through government contracts in Northwest. His death sent shockwaves through business and political circles. Investigations began immediately. Police collected CCTV footage. They tracked cell phone records. The cold case unit took over when initial efforts stalled. The trail led investigators through Johannesburg suburbs, back to Pretoria, and eventually to Mamelodi. 3 men were identified as the shooters: Saifo Hudla, Matamela Mutapa, and Bongankosi Kumalo. Cell phone data placed them near the crime scene. CCTV evidence corroborated their movements. But the bigger question was, who ordered the hit? In court, Saifo Hudla provided a confession. He claimed that Mathibela had paid them R60,000s to kill Boswana. The confession was read in July 2020. It was a critical piece of evidence. Another accused, Bongankosi Kumalo, told the court that Mathibela ordered the hit because Boswana was having an affair with Mathibela's wife. Khumalo's statement came in August 2020. Both men later recanted. They alleged police torture. The defense challenged the confessions during a trial within a trial, but the judge allowed the statements as evidence. Without these confessions, the case against Mathibela would have relied primarily on cell phone links and CCTV. The confessions gave prosecutors a direct connection to motive and payment. The affair story was never corroborated beyond Khumalo's statement. Officially, the court convicted Mathibela as the mastermind regardless of motive. Whether the murder was personal or tied to deeper political or business conflicts remained unresolved. While the murder investigation continued, Mathibela faced other charges. In early 2019, taxi drivers in Mamelodi staged large protests. They halted transport services at the Deneboom taxi rank. Their grievance was clear: they were paying illegal fees to Mathibela through Mata. They called it extortion. Police Minister Biki Cele publicly announced a manhunt for Mathibela in March 2019. Several of his associates were arrested on extortion charges. On March 13, 2019, Mathibela was arrested at Germiston. He had been preparing to fly to Dubai, violating bail conditions. He was remanded in custody. The extortion case seemed strong. Drivers were willing to testify. The Gauteng government had placed Mata under official administration due to internal chaos. But on May 7, 2020, the National Prosecuting Authority withdrew the charges. The reason? Key witnesses refused to cooperate. Fear was the assumed cause. Witnesses understood that testifying could mean death. Mathibela's network had demonstrated its capacity for violence repeatedly. This wasn't the first time charges collapsed. It illustrated a broader pattern. Even when authorities built cases, enforcement required witnesses. In an environment governed by fear, witnesses disappeared. Mathibela wasn't the only member of his family involved in Mata. His uncle, Suthu Mathibela, served as deputy chair of the association. Suthu had been a person of interest in police investigations into extortion and money laundering. Authorities planned to charge him alongside Vusi. On October 22, 2019, Suthu was ambushed while driving out of Mamelodi. Gunmen killed him in a hail of bullets. The attack occurred near Kwamlanga in Mpumalanga along Cullinan Road. His death removed a key figure from the investigation. It also sent a message. The violence wasn't random, it was targeted, it was surgical. Suthu's assassination highlighted the reach of the conflict. Mamelodi's taxi wars weren't contained within the township, they extended across provincial lines. The murder also demonstrated the instability within Mata itself. Rivals, internal factions, or external enemies, any could have ordered the hit. Suthu's death remained unsolved. Mathibela's operation wasn't unique. Analysts studying South African organized crime note that over half of recorded assassinations between 2015 and 2020 were connected to the minibus taxi trade. The industry provides a pool of armed men. Taxi networks often supply hitmen. The assassins who killed Boswana had backgrounds linked to the Johannesburg hitman network. The taxi sector's informal structure invites this. Associations operate with little oversight. Wealth flows through cash transactions. Disputes are settled violently. Turf wars are common. When drivers in Mamelodi stopped paying Mathibela's R200 weekly fee, his enforcers withdrew protection. Violence flared immediately. The system relied on coercion. This wasn't just about transport, it was about control over an economic artery. Whoever controlled the taxis controlled money, routes, and labor. That control extended into other criminal enterprises. Protection rackets targeted not just drivers but also local businesses. The line between legitimate association fees and extortion dissolved. Mathibela exemplified an organized crime model. He operated a hierarchy. He collected payments. He enforced compliance. He eliminated threats. The taxi industry provided the infrastructure. His ambition turned that infrastructure into a criminal enterprise. The investigation into Boswana's murder lasted 9 years. The Gauteng Cold Case Unit led the effort. Detectives used cell phone forensics to link the shooters. They analyzed call records from the day of the attack. They tracked movements through CCTV. At Sandton City, cameras captured Boswana and Baloyi's last known location before the ambush. Police also tracked the suspects to Alexandra after the hit. Investigators faced significant challenges. Witness intimidation was pervasive. Physical forensics were limited. The case relied heavily on digital evidence and the contested confessions. Police officers received commendations for their persistence. General Masemola publicly praised the detectives after the 2022 conviction. The investigation also revealed political dimensions. Boswana's wealth came from government contracts. His murder occurred amid Northwest political turmoil. Accusations flew between rival ANC factions. Some alleged that provincial leaders ordered the hit. Others pointed to business rivalries. The investigation probed these angles but produced no charges against politicians. The case illustrated how embedded criminals evade justice. Mathibela had connections. He had money. He had a network willing to kill. Yet forensic persistence eventually linked him to the murder. The digital trail proved decisive. Mathibela's trial was heard in the North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria. He faced charges of premeditated murder, attempted murder, and illegal possession of firearms. His co-accused, Hudla, Mutapa, and Kumalo, stood trial alongside him. The trial within a trial over the confessions became a focal point. The defense argued that the confessions were coerced. The state argued they were voluntary and corroborated by other evidence. On June 23, 2022, the court convicted all 4 men. The judge found Mathibela guilty of orchestrating the murder. The 3 shooters were found guilty of executing it. The verdict came nearly 7 years after Boswana's death. Sentencing occurred in January 2024. Mathibela and his co-accused each received 30 years imprisonment. The sentences ran concurrently for multiple charges. The court emphasized the premeditated nature of the crime. It noted the use of hired killers. It acknowledged the impact on Boswana's family and on public confidence in justice. The conviction dismantled the myth of Mathibela's invincibility. For years, he had evaded consequences. Charges collapsed. Witnesses disappeared. But the murder charge held. The digital evidence, the confessions, and the investigative persistence combined to secure a conviction. Mathibela's reign inflicted deep scars on Mamelodi. Residents lived in fear. Drivers paid extortion rather than face violence. Businesses operated under threat. When taxi drivers finally rebelled in 2019, they staged public protests. They demanded Mathibela's arrest. They halted transport services. They called him a terrorist. After his arrest, police paraded Mathibela in handcuffs through Mamelodi. Some locals celebrated. They said he was finally tamed. But the damage persisted. Trust in authorities had eroded. The community had learned that formal law enforcement couldn't protect them. The code of silence became a survival mechanism. The Gauteng government's decision to place Mata under official administration was an acknowledgement of institutional failure. The association had become a criminal front. Legitimate taxi operators suffered alongside those exploited by Mathibela. The taxi sector's reputation deteriorated further. Mathibela's story also revealed the vulnerability of informal economies. The minibus taxi trade employs thousands. It generates billions. But without regulation, it becomes a breeding ground for crime. His case wasn't an outlier. It was symptomatic of a larger problem. The political dimensions of the Boswana murder remain unresolved. The casino meeting with Fikile Mbalula raised questions. Mbalula's denials didn't erase suspicions. Accusations against Supra Mahumapelo lingered. The fact that no politician was charged doesn't mean no political motive existed. It means that evidence sufficient for prosecution wasn't found. Some observers believe powerful figures ordered Boswana's death. Others believe Mathibela acted independently, driven by personal grievance or business rivalry. The court convicted Mathibela as the mastermind, but the court didn't determine whether he received orders from above. This uncertainty reflects broader patterns in South African organized crime. Business, politics, and criminality intersect. Contracts, connections, and violence blend. Investigations face political pressure. Witnesses fear reprisal. Evidence gets buried. Mathibela's conviction doesn't close the book on these questions. It answers one part of the story: who organized the hit. It doesn't answer why or whether others in power facilitated it. Mathibela's conviction didn't end taxi violence. The industry's structural problems persist. Over 200,000 minibuses operate with minimal oversight. Associations govern themselves. Disputes escalate into turf wars. Assassinations remain common. Reform requires regulation. It requires transparency. It requires dismantling the informal power structures that enable criminals. But reform also threatens livelihoods. The taxi sector provides income for thousands of people who have few alternatives. Heavy-handed intervention risks backlash. Mathibela's case offers a blueprint. Digital forensics, persistent investigation, and judicial rigor can bring embedded criminals to justice. But it took 9 years. It required a high-profile victim. It needed confessions that could have been excluded. Most taxi crimes don't receive that level of scrutiny. The R90 billion taxi economy isn't going away. The question is whether South Africa can integrate it into a formal system that protects drivers, passengers, and communities while preventing the rise of future Mathibelas. In January 2024, Vusi Mathibela stood before the court to hear his sentence, 30 years. He was 38 years old. The sentence meant he would likely spend most of his remaining life in prison. His co-accused received the same terms. The judge noted that the murder was cold-blooded. It was planned. It was executed for hire. General Masemola commended the detectives who solved the case. The conviction represented a rare victory. Most taxi-related assassinations go unpunished. Witnesses stay silent. Evidence disappears. Mathibela's conviction broke that pattern. But the victory was partial. Suthu Mathibela's killers were never caught. The extortion charges collapsed. Drivers in Mamelodi still navigate a system shaped by fear. The taxi industry remains violent. Mathibela's imprisonment removes one kingpin. It doesn't remove the conditions that created him. The loose regulation, the informal power structures, the intersection of business and politics, all remain intact. Vusi Mathibela's story is often framed as one man's criminality, but it's more than that. It's a case study in how informal economies, weak institutions, and political networks create space for organized crime. His taxi empire thrived because the system allowed it. Fear silenced witnesses. Connections delayed prosecution. Violence enforced compliance. His conviction shows that justice is possible, even in such an environment. But it took 9 years, advanced forensics, and a high-profile victim. Most communities don't have that. Most crimes don't get solved. Mathibela is in prison. The system that produced him remains. And in townships across South Africa, new strongmen are watching, learning, and waiting for their turn.